Okay, well, I'd like to welcome all participants to this public meeting about the Cambridge South East Transport Scheme, and in particular phase 2, the offline high quality public transport route between broadly the Four Wentways area and the Cambridge Biomedical Campus. This evening's meeting is going to be split into 3 discrete sections. The first section is going to focus on the consultation that took place just before Christmas 2020, between October and December. The second section will deal with the environmental impact assessment. And then the third section will deal with route variants proposed from the Great Shelford Stapleford area and the Babram area. And then the meeting will conclude with a timeline for going forward. So with that, I'm just going to introduce people who will be participating in this meeting. Michael Payne from Mcdonald will be taking the first section on the consultation that took place before Christmas 2020.
Good evening, everyone.
James Montgomery from Mcdonald will be dealing with the environmental impact assessment. The variant routes, I think that could be any panelist dealing with those. And then Jane Osei-Imwe, who's the project manager, the GCP project manager for phase 2, will deal with future steps. So just before we start with the first presentation, I should say that when it comes to questions, comments, and so on, I always assume that anyone who asks a question and gets an answer may well want to ask a follow-up question. So please take that as read. If you want to ask a follow-up question, just go straight ahead. That's how I like to run meetings, and we'll see how it goes. But over to Michael Payne, first of all, to talk about the consultation on phase 2 that took place several months ago now.
Thank you, Tony. I'll just share my screen.
We're not seeing anything, Mike.
So, sorry,
we're just waiting for Michael to share his screen at the
having
minute.
some problems with the technology. Please just bear with me. Is that working now? Are you seeing the title slide for presentation?
Yeah, I can see it.
Right. Okay. I'll carry on.
I hope everybody else can.
Yeah, I can.
That's fine.
Okay. So this is the agenda for the session this evening, which Tony has already covered. So I'll go straight on to Item 1, which is to explain the design refinements that we've made to the scheme in response to the comments received in the EIA consultation. So I've grouped these into themes. So that's just a reminder of the scope of the scheme as Tony outlined in his introduction. So moving on to the design refinements in response to consultation. The first slide covers the theme of design refinements to the Francis Crick Avenue section of the route. So 4 key points here. We have reconfigured the cross-section of Francis Crick Avenue to provide additional space for pedestrians and cyclists. So we now have a separate footway and cycle route along the western side of Francis Crick Avenue. There's a cross-section on the next slide which will explain this further. Respondents to the consultation were also clear that they also felt there was a need for a footway along the eastern side of Francis Crick Avenue, and that has been provided. We've also done some work to improve the design of the junction of Francis Crick Avenue and the Cambridge guided busway, which is also close to the access to the proposed Cambridge South station. You can see that the space provided for cyclists and pedestrians around that junction has been increased, and there's also a plan to provide a direct diagonal crossing from the access to the station across to the AstraZeneca building. And in terms of landscaping and planting, we have widened the median areas between the traffic lanes and the public transport route running up the centre of Francis Crick Avenue to provide more space for to allow both trees to be planted in the median areas and to retain the existing hedges along the edge of Francis Crick Avenue. So in cross section, this is what Francis Crick Avenue will look like. So from left to right, you can see the 2-metre footway and a separate 3.5 metre cycle route. We've added a buffer between the cycle route and the northbound carriageway. That's actually that's wider in proportion than actually shown on the cross section. It's the same width as the footway at 2 metres. We have reduced the width of the carriageways from previously those were 4.5 metres. They've now been reduced to 3.7 metres, and that space saved has been reallocated to provide greater width elsewhere. So the central bus stops, there is 3.3 metres on each side. The public transport route is 6.5 metres wide at this point. And then on the east side, you have the southbound carriageway, again 3.7 metres, and the footway at 2 metres. So moving on to the 9 Wells area. There was a question in the consultation regarding the provision of pedestrian and cycle access to the 9 Wells Local Nature Reserve. That was supported. So our intention, subject to landowner agreement, is to provide that. There are, I think, the option that was preferred was to provide an access along the basically from the public transport route running along the same alignment that the existing access track runs. There's also a potential access from Francis Crick Avenue running in a along an access track that's been provided for the landowner access to adjacent fields. The shaded areas on the image show the extent of landscape planting proposed in the Nine Wells area. This is not as extensive as we had originally proposed, but in discussion with one of the landowners, the landowner concerned didn't feel that our planting proposals on their land were acceptable, and they wanted to retain that land potentially for environmental enhancements associated with their own plans. So the main landscaping will be this triangular area between the public transport route and the Nine Wells Nature Reserve, which will be planted as grassland. There'll also be a water feature at the adjacent Hobson's Brook, which will be mitigation habitat for water voles. Moving on to landscaping and planting more generally. So the image on this slide shows the area around the bridge crossing over the River Granter near Stapleford. You can see substantial areas of grassland planting and also some scattered trees alongside the river, and along the route itself, hedgerows interspersed with tree planting. There was a question in the consultation asking people if they supported the idea of picnic areas near the River Granter crossings. So that was supported. So we plan to take that forward, subject to landowner agreement. But there are opportunities to provide that within the areas shown as being landscaped on this image. Some of that land, the project is certainly intending to acquire, because the landowner has broadly supported that in this particular case. So moving on to stops and crossings. The image here shows the latest landscape design for the Stapleford stop at Haverhill Road. So the stop layouts at all the intermediate stops has been reconfigured to provide greater opportunities for landscaping. The landscape design includes measures to reduce the visual impact of stops and provide noise attenuation where appropriate. There was feedback from the consultation requesting the provision of additional cycle parking and storage. So that has now been incorporated into the design of stops. And also a new feature in the design in response to the consultation feedback is to provide Pegasus crossings, which are signalised crossings designed for use by horse riders, where the public transport route and the adjacent active travel route cross the roads close to the stop. So at Sawston Road, at Haverhill Road, at Hinton Way, and also at Granham's Road, where there's just a crossing but not a stop. Some quite major changes have been made to the design of the travel hub. The capacity of the travel hub in terms of an initial build, has been reduced and refined to 1,250 spaces, with a lower density of parking and enhanced landscaping. So there is now, you can see on the image to the right, there are two distinct areas of parking to the north and south of the travel hub interchange area. The parking closest to the travel hub interchange area is blue badge parking. So you can see that significant areas of landscaping around the parking areas, and also landscaping along pedestrian routes within the parking areas. We've also modified the drainage strategy for travel hub. So we now have a series of attenuation ponds and drainage swales leading down towards the River Granter. So the idea here is to try and create something akin to the former water meadows in that area. We've confirmed following the consultation that there will be active travel paths connecting the travel hub both with Babraham Research Campus and Granter Park. Those were both well supported in the consultation. The image also shows the River Granter crossing at Babraham, and a significant change that we made, again in response to consultation feedback, is we have, as far as possible, reduced the height of those crossing structures. So the height from ground level to the bottom of the bridge structures has been reduced to 3.5 meters. So that's a summary of the key changes that we've made in response to the issues raised in the EIA consultation on the design and development of the preferred route. So I'll now hand over to James Montgomery, who will
no, we're going to have questions. We're going to have questions and comments now. Before we move over to James, just before we have any questions or comments, I would just say that the slides that you see on tonight's presentation will all be published tomorrow morning on the GCP website. So they're all available there. While Michael's been talking, a number of people have posed questions. If you want to make a comment or ask a question, just click the raise hand symbol at the bottom of your screen. But I've already got what I think are Linda Worth, David Blake, Sam Davis, Peter King, and then Matt Danish. So I'm going to ask Linda first.
Oh, thank you, Tony. Although my hand wasn't raised, but hey ho, that's fine.
Well, you sent a written question.
Something.
Yeah, you emailed a question to me. It came at the bottom of the screen.
I did put a question in. Yeah, okay. So the access around the Nine Wells area should be available to everybody, including equestrians. That route around there has been available to them on a permissive basis for well over 25 years. So please, can you look at making sure that everybody has that access? And the second point is that I noted that you said that the crossings are going to be Pegasus crossings at the travel hubs, which is good news. But I just wanted to reassure everybody that this is not some enormous great crossing. All that is required to change a normal toucan crossing into a Pegasus crossing is an extra pole at the back available for horse riders to press a button as well. So that's not a massive increase in cost to include us. Okay, thank you.
Thanks for clarifying that, Linda.
Okay, I did see a written question came up on my screen from David Blake. So if David wants to come in next, please.
Tony, I didn't actually submit anything. I don't know what's happening, but I haven't submitted anything.
Oh, was it David? Sorry, was it David Plank?
Might be. I have some questions, but they're on a different subject, probably not germane to this part of the meeting.
Okay, well, I'll bring in later, David, then.
Right.
Thanks very much for that. Well, should we go on to David Plank next, please?
The Trumpington Residents Association asked a number of questions and made a number of requests in our consultation response, which have not been covered in the presentation so far. But rather than delaying the meeting, I will pick those up in writing subsequently. The two questions that I want to ask now are, firstly, please explain again the landscaping lost in the relation to the Nine Wells Local Nature Reserve area and what precisely the landowner is proposing. And related to that, will the tree buffer be affected? Also, if necessary, can the land be CPO'd? The second question is a major concern for the association is construction impact on Nine Wells Local Nature Reserve. Has the potential construction impact been lessened? That was only 30 meters between the construction compound and the local nature reserve for a period of roughly 2 years. Has that been lessened in discussion with Network Rail in relation to their compounds for Cambridge South Station?
I think those are both environmental questions. So do you want me to answer them, Mike?
Yes, please.
Okay. David, in terms of, take the second one first, the construction compounds, maybe if I can, I don't know if I can ask for control. No. The construction compounds are now, the Network Rail Cambridge South Station compound is still, I believe, proposed to be in the field immediately in front of Nine Wells, as you can see, but it only, I believe, extends about halfway across the field towards Nine Wells. This scheme's construction compound is proposed to be to the northeast in the county council field, and would be as far, if not further away from Nine Wells Nature Reserve itself as the Cambridge South Station compound. So we're retaining a buffer around the actual reserve boundary. We are not as close as, I believe, some images that might have shown in the past. Yeah. In terms of the planting that we're proposing, in discussion with the city ecologist about the planting proposed around the Nine Wells, he expressed a preference for not having a tree buffer. I think you'll be aware the gentleman is responsible for day-to-day management of the Nine Wells Reserve. He expressed a preference for having grassland where it comes up towards the nature reserve itself, which is what we've included in the design. What we have not been able to do is put in planting in the large field that's shown as white immediately to the northwest of the nature reserve, and we don't believe that that land could be CPO'd. We'd have to justify the requirement for the land, and we don't believe that we can do that for this scheme. It's not needed particularly for specific mitigation, and it's not severed. On
that, what is the landowner actually proposing?
Well, we're not party to the landowner's proposals, but in detail. But they have commented, as Mike said, in meetings with us, that they don't want to. They would like to keep it for their own purposes, linked to some form of environmental enhancements associated with further development of CBC itself.
Oh, I see. Right. It's something to do with the Cambridge Biomedical Campus vision then?
I believe so, yes. I think
yeah.
that...
Well, that has little to do with landscaping, but anyway, that's another debate.
Yes, a separate issue, I'm afraid, yes.
Okay, well, thanks very much for that.
There is a detailed consultation report that is being published or will be published, where comments and queries that have been raised are addressed. So if you feel, David, that some of your questions haven't been addressed to now, hopefully in that meeting, in that report, that will be set out. But also in the environmental statement, there is a detailed register of all questions and queries related to out of the scoping opinion request, where we document exactly how those have been dealt with, where they have been dealt with. I suspect that's not necessarily relevant to your questions themselves, David, but I think we've addressed most of them as best as we can. Yeah.
Thanks for highlighting that, James. Yeah, I mean, this presentation can't cover, every single comment, but there were 399 responses to the EIA consultation. So the EIA consultation summary report has been published. It was published at the end of last week as an appendix to the Joint Assembly meeting papers. So I would encourage people to review the consultation report in the Joint Assembly papers if they feel that the issue that they have raised hasn't been mentioned in tonight's presentation. There is more that has been done than it is possible to summarise it in a presentation. These were the main themes and the matters covered in the questions that were set out in the consultation survey. If it's not mentioned in the presentation, it doesn't mean it hasn't been considered or acted upon.
Okay, I'm now going to bring in Sam Davis. I had a note from Sam to say she wanted to ask 4 questions. If you could pose a couple of questions, Sam, and then I'll allow some other speakers, and then I'll come back to you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Tony. So first question relates to the site diagram around Francis Crick Avenue. Is that this? Not that one, the one actually sort of, yeah, this one. So is this the diagram which says something cryptic about the interconnection with Cambridge South being sorted by others? One of these little captions on the left-hand side.
Yes, well, I can explain the situation here. So Network Rail are submitting a Transport and Works Act order application for Cambridge South Station. Their application is being submitted on the basis that their scheme is independent of the Cambridge South East Transport Scheme. So their plans show what they are proposing to deliver, assuming the CSET scheme does not go ahead. The Transport and Works Act order application that we intend to submit for the CSET scheme, subject to board approval, is required to be on the same basis. We have to demonstrate that our scheme is deliverable, it's not dependent upon the delivery of the Cambridge South Station scheme. So there is, so the formal plans, I agree, give the impression that the schemes are being, the interface between the scheme may not be properly thought through. I can assure you that in reality, the 2 project teams have been working very closely in recent months, and there are plans to ensure that there's a fully integrated design solution to accommodate both CSET and Cambridge South Station, should both schemes be consented. But the rules of the process are that we have to show that the schemes are deliverable independently.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. Can you go on to the next slide then, please?
Yeah.
So I was a bit confused about the widths of the remaining carriageways here, because presumably those will be the spaces where non-CSET buses will move around the area. Is there room at 3.75 to 3.7 to have both bus and bus stop? Where are the bus stops for the non-CSET buses going to go? I'm confused.
I think at the moment there is only a bus stop on the southbound carriageway of Francis Crick Avenue. The 3.7 metre carriageway width is based on that being the minimum standard for a carriageway that is suitable for use by large emergency vehicles, so fire engines, etc. It would be possible to have a bus stop on a 3.7 metre carriageway. It would just mean that the traffic would have to wait behind the bus while it was stopped. We haven't ruled out the possibility of non-CSET bus services using the public transport route if the vehicles operating those services met the required standard for use of the CSET infrastructure.
Okay, I'm sure I'm just being dense here. Where is the provision for bus stops for non-CSET buses which may not be compliant with the CSET infrastructure, without, as you say, holding up emergency vehicles in 3.7 metre carriageways? I mean, presumably you are going to have some non-CSET bus stops on Francis Crick Avenue.
Well, this is a matter that requires further discussion with the bus operators. As my understanding is, at the moment there is only a bus stop on the southbound carriageway of Francis Crick Avenue. There is no bus stop on the northbound carriageway of Francis Crick Avenue. So we would, in principle, we would seek to retain bus stops that exist at the moment. We haven't made specific provision for any bus stops that don't exist at present.
Sorry, I really don't want to dominate the conversation here, but the campus transport needs review from 2019 talks explicitly about increasing the volume of bus trips to the campus. And yet you're telling me that the most we can hope for is to, in principle, seek to retain the one bus stop that's there at the moment?
Well, obviously the CSET services will provide a significant enhancement of services to the biomedical campus. So it's not clear what additional services might be provided in 2025 over and above the CSET services, and with hopefully a significant move towards electric buses by 2025, it might be that all the services are able to meet the standards that would allow them to use the CSET public transport route. So it's difficult to be certain what services other than the services that CSET are proposing might be operating on Francis Crick Avenue in 2025. None of the existing bus operators have responded formally to our consultation to request make specific requests relating to the design of Francis Crick Avenue. We will. I think this indicates a need for some further discussion with bus operators regarding their long-term plans.
I think it's an issue that could come back to a future meeting of this type. And in the meanwhile, I think it'd be very helpful if you kept Sam fully updated with your thoughts and ideas.
I think, just to conclude, for me, this is absolutely waiting to fall between the stools of Cambridge South and CSET. Bus operators will be wanting to send buses down Francis Crick Avenue more than just the CSET bus. And I feel extremely uneasy about what you've just told me about what provision you're envisaging. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Okay. Well, I think that issue is going to go on and on. Next, I'm going to bring in Matt Danish.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Matt.
Great. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, thanks to Sam also for bringing up that issue here. I just would like to say I think that absolutely the buses should be using public transport route. And number two, so should the emergency vehicles. I wouldn't want to see this road. It's already got way too much carriageway on it as it is. And we've pushed to get it smaller because, quite frankly, it's squeezing pedestrians and cyclists off to the side quite a lot as it is. And I wouldn't want to see the carriageways get any larger than they currently are being shown. Now, my questions were pertaining to, you haven't shown the roundabout at the southern end of Francis Crick Avenue. I'd be curious to see what changes were there. And then regarding the overpass of the A11, has there been any updates about improvements to the ramps? We've been asking for the ramps to be made much more, let's say, gentle and easy to use and comfortable and basically straightforward rather than switching back in very tight, narrow and steep spaces as they were shown before. So I was wondering if these two issues have been addressed lately.
Michael?
At the moment, there isn't any change to the design of the ramps at the A11 footbridge.
It's not a footbridge. I mean, it won't be a footbridge in the future. It should be an active travel route.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. The other matter was what was the question about the Dame Mary Archway, Francis Crick Avenue roundabout?
Yes, has that been improved for walking and cycling? In that case, I think it's a walking and cycling area, but let's say active travel. Has it been improved for that?
There have been some improvements made to the design of that for pedestrians and cyclists. Yes.
And do you have a slide for that?
I don't have it in the. I don't have it in the presentation. I can share a all of the latest general arrangement drawings for the whole scheme again are published as an appendix to the Joint Assembly report. So it's all the drawings are available in the Joint Assembly papers.
Because of the size of the drawings, it might be difficult for people to download it, but if it's required, we can share those.
It is very difficult to download them. If you could share them, I'd be very grateful.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Thanks. I will try and download them.
Okay, Matt?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I did see a comment that came up from Peter King. It was about in the Sawston area. Does Peter want to pose a question to everyone?
Good evening, thanks for the time. Yes, it's more related to the new development that's been built in Sawston / Babraham. The bus route seems to be very close to the new development, with the majority of it not being populated or sold yet. There's probably been little feedback from this particular area. I just wondered what sort of landscaping and planting for noise and pollution reduction will be taking place. I didn't see that in the previous slides.
Do with that, Mike?
Yes, please, James.
Okay, so there is a small area of land between the route and the boundary of the new housing development. Within that area, there would be an acoustic barrier put up that meets standards required for noise attenuation. Between the acoustic barrier and the route, there would be planting and possibly a bund. The bund would provide further noise attenuation, but it does create problems of landscape maintenance if we put a bund in between the bund and the acoustic fence. So the intention is to put planting in there as a bit of a screening of the acoustic barrier, because the acoustic barrier will also provide a little bit of screening visually to residents in the housing development. We have had one individual who has purchased a property in the housing development and has made has approached the project through the EIA consultation, which we've taken on board. Having looked at the housing, I was out there myself. It seems like the housing development itself is set a little bit back from where the acoustic barrier would be, with a little bit of public realm land with footpaths and so on between the houses and the edge of the boundary of the housing development. So doesn't look like what it looks like. Most of the majority of gardens in that area don't go right up to the edge of the housing development, is what I could, as far as I could tell.
Okay, and how high is this acoustic barrier? Is it like a normal size fence, 2 meter, 6 foot?
I think it would be around about 2 meters. I don't have the precise details to hand, I'm afraid. Yeah.
And that would run along the entire stretch of the development?
Yes, where the development is adjacent to the scheme. Yes. Okay,
and is there any lighting issues from the stop there as well that could impact on the residents?
I don't believe so. We've done quite a detailed lighting assessment of lighting impacts on properties. That was it wasn't flagged up as an issue in that area. The lighting is designed to be relatively well to minimize light spill, and has been agreed. The standards for lighting have been agreed with the local council officers responsible for ensuring lighting is adequate.
Okay.
No, thank you very much for your time.
Howard, I think a question came up on my screen from Howard a little while ago.
Yes, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Howard.
Great, thank you very much. Regarding the park and ride, I gather the 2,000 space car park has now been chopped to 1,200, which is a bit of a surprise. I just really wonder what the reasons for that decision were, which does obviously impact on the whole question of viability. We know the BCR for this scheme is 0.71, which is way under what can get approval anyway. It's far too low and far too poor. I just really, and also our own numbers we're crunching in terms of passenger demand and passenger journey times seem to be overstated on the route. And we'll come on to that later when we talk about the Shelford railway alignment, which the numbers look a lot healthier. I'm just really intrigued what's caused the reduction.
Michael?
Yes, Howard, the 1,250 spaces is based on some further modelling work that has been completed since the outline business case was published, and we've also taken a more conservative view on how many spaces that we can justify over and above the numbers forecast in the modelling, which are only up to the year 2036 and reflect the growth. Well, the growth in the model is based on growth in the existing local plan with some additional allowance on top of that, but there is because the local plan currently only runs to 2026, there is very little growth in the modelling between 2026 and 2036, but obviously there's a new local plan in preparation. So the other factor that had previously encouraged us to plan for a higher capacity was the possibility of measures being introduced under the city access programme that would have discouraged people from driving into Cambridge city centre and increased the demand for park and ride and travel hub facilities. No such plans have been brought forward at this point, and therefore we didn't feel we could make a case for a higher level of provision based on the CSET scheme alone. So we've taken a more conservative view of the number of spaces that we can make a case for in the Transport and Works Act order application for our scheme. We didn't want to be in a situation where we were being accused of providing more spaces than could realistically be justified.
Okay, so I think your answer raises more questions in terms of the fact that our independent report did the modelling as well and came to the conclusion that CSET would operate at full capacity from day one, so it wasn't scalable in terms of any increased growth. You're now saying that that is wrong, that you've scaled everything back so you can get the growth. We've been asking for 3 months to see your modelling, and you haven't chosen to disclose it to us. So I feel really, this is all rather strange, really. You know, I just don't know really what to believe. And in terms of your BCR, that's presumably taken a nosedive then, if you've almost halved the number of passengers. I'm really confused now.
Well, perhaps this is more appropriate for Jane to answer, but
Yes.
But you know, GCP have made a commitment to publish an addendum to the outline business case as and when that has been assured and approved by GCP.
Not having the evidence available then.
Sorry, Howard. So I think we mentioned this when we met with you, that we're still in the GCP is still in the process of reviewing it. And once that's been reviewed, we'll be able to publish it and we can send that round to everyone. But at the moment, we're still in that process. So that's why I haven't seen it.
I mean, that's typical, isn't it? You're not giving us any time. Well, it's a very bad line. When did you actually say you were going to circulate the data?
We'll circulate the data as soon as it's been approved by GCP.
Okay, so are you recommending then that the GCP don't make a decision this month on this until we know what the data is and what the new model is? Because you've obviously replaced the old model with a new model.
At the moment, what we're going for right now is not dependent on that model, on the data from that model.
Which model?
We have presented at this joint assembly meeting coming up. We've presented the consultation summary report. That's what we're asking the board to approve, and then to approve a Transport and Works Act application.
So you agree the whole thing you're presenting to us is opaque at the moment?
We haven't. What we've presented to you is still based on the old data.
Right, which gave a 0.7.
Which is what is available and in the public domain.
Yeah, well, we've heard the arguments, Howard. John Howard had a similar question to Howard's about the number, the car parking space at the park and ride site. So I presume that John's heard the answer that's been given. So I'm going to move on to Rachel Northfield now.
Thank you, Tony. I was just going to pick up on the bus stop conversation further, which was earlier, Francis Crick Avenue. On behalf of the CBC, I think we've said quite clearly that we need additional bus stops on that route for buses which aren't CSET related. We have a number that come round the campus at the moment, provided by different bus providers. Very happy to pick up offline with the CSET team. We're in regular conversation anyway, or have been up until recently, and I think probably we need to have another catch-up, Jane, with regards to the bus stops. But very happy to do that. Also happy to make sure that our connections with the bus companies are invited and come along and support as well. So very happy to help with that one. The other one that was yeah, no, you're very welcome, Jane. If we pick something up outside of the conversation, very happy to do that. The other thing I was just going to say, like with others, a little bit concerned around the information tonight about the reduction in parking at the Babram Park and Ride. We've seen that from a campus perspective as a really important location, picking up vehicles coming from the A5 from the A11 and also the A505. So quite a lot of sort of Newmarket, Saffron Walden, right the way around that side of the route in. and then the very quick, swift route across into campus to support the reduction in traffic in local areas. So anyway, we're a bit concerned to see that, and would be, like others, really interested to see the data and what that might look like in terms of future. I'm also guessing that with the landscape, there'd be future opportunity for expansion.
That's right. I mean, what's proposed here is the initial build. The layout has, you can see within the layout that there is space within the footprint of the travel hub for the parking areas to be further expanded at a later date if demand justifies that. And obviously, there's been the recent announcement of the new vision for the biomedical campus. So the design here does not preclude expansion of the parking capacity at the travel hub at a future date if demand justifies that. But the there's a balance between providing, there's a concern that if we built too much beyond the demand, that we could prove that building at that capacity from day one could be open to challenge.
Okay, well, go on, Rachel.
Sorry, Tony, just one bit. Obviously, we're really concerned to make sure that is utilised as much as possible for the future, because, as I say, it will stop bringing people in over the Gog Hills, etc., which would be a useful thing. The other thing I was going to say was we're very concerned to see that there's enough cycle parking associated with this park and ride, and that as much as possible there is good lighting and locker facilities, secure space around this area, and also leading backwards and forwards to it along the route, to encourage people for all options with regards to active travel. And I suspect that will be in the detail as it comes forward.
There is space allocated for both cycle storage lockers and cycle parking stands in that central area adjacent to the travel hub facilities building. That's this image is really highlighting the landscaping proposals of the travel hub. The general arrangement drawing does clearly show the amount of cycle storage and cycle parking that is proposed.
Okay.
Okay. Matthew Puncheon had a comment or question a little while ago. Does Matthew want to put that?
No, I'll hold on that. It relates back to the point that was just been made. So it'll relate to the variant routes that I'm talking about in a moment. But
okay, thanks very much. John Burns.
Okay, hopefully you can hear me.
Yes.
Great, so I'm using another laptop here. Just a slightly on this one, actually, about this travel hub. Obviously, I'm from Haverhill. I don't get involved in any of the politics for Cambridge at all, or the Cambridgeshire region, if you like. Couple of questions is, it was mentioned about the local plan being up to 2026. Obviously, West Suffolk's current one goes to 2031. And we're currently, I'm heavily involved in the working party for 2041. We've just had 200 houses completed by Persimmon as part of the 3,500 that we're going to be getting until 2031. And I was speaking to the manager there the other day, and he said all 200 houses, the occupants all commute to the Cambridge sub-region by car. So that's, and they've all got, they don't car share, they don't do anything, they don't use the buses. If they have to use the buses, they have to, walk downtown, which is down a 500-foot hill. So I'm a little bit concerned about these numbers, as others have expressed, because I'm not so certain that they're taking any account of Haverhill's and surrounding area, of course, future growth. In terms of, you know, we know there's not a good bus service at the moment other than the 13, which goes around all the villages if it needs to. There is a fast one, obviously, or 3 fast ones in the morning, which gets subsequently delayed around the town. So I don't know how, what I'm trying to find out is how much has been taken of the fact across border, ignoring the plans for, you know, loads of houses near Linton, all this sort of stuff. And I keep asking this question every time. If you're going to encourage people to park up in this place, park up in this place, you know, whether there is a ban on vehicles in city centre. But most of our people who do commute to Cambridge work at Haddon Brooks and the biocampuses. So I think the other thing, from an environmental point of view, just to the, what would be northeast of this, obviously is the A1307, A11 junction. And I know one of the concerns our town council had was over the potential for there to be congestion as people were trying to get in and out of this area. And I'm wondering, from an environmental point of view, has anyone actually done any modelling on that as well? Thank you.
Michael?
Well, to take the last one first, yes, there has been traffic modelling done, including of the so the access junction to the travel hub from the A1307 is proposed to take the form of a roundabout, as has been identified. One of the advantages of this site is that it's intercepting journeys into Cambridge from both the Haverhill and Linton direction on the A1307 and from the A11 to the north. So we expect nearly all the people who are using this site are people who would otherwise be travelling by car past the access junction. So we're not going to be generating new journeys to this site. We hope to be simply intercepting journeys that would otherwise be continuing past the site. So as long as the access junction is designed to be with the appropriate capacity, it's you know, the idea is when we're intercepting traffic, not generating traffic. So there will the Transport and Works Act order application will be supported by a full transport assessment report, which will provide the evidence of that modelling work. On the question of have we allowed for growth beyond growth that's formally planned, the answer is yes. If we just took the growth that was if we took the high growth scenario that's used for across all the GCP major public transport projects, if we just took the high growth scenario in terms of planned growth plus an allowance for a higher level of economic growth, we would be at 1,000 spaces. So out of that 1,250, 250 spaces is essentially for growth that isn't in any formal plans, but is our future proofing for growth that we think is likely in the period, say 2026 to 2036, but isn't actually written down in a plan anywhere. So there is that 250 spaces is our margin for growth that isn't in formal plans at the moment.
Okay, if I just quickly come back, you mentioned GCP area. Of course, Haverhill and Suffolk is not in the GCP area. specifically, but we do provide a massive amount of employment to the Cambridge businesses in terms of commuting. So I just want to.
Well, the transport model captures journeys travelling on the A1307 corridor, whether even if they originate outside the actual area covered by the model.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, the ANPR data, I realise, picked that up. But of course, what you don't know, or you don't know whereabouts in, like, say, Suffolk or even Essex for that matter, where they've come from, because obviously none of the county councils would agree to work together with you to do a proper ANPR survey. So, all right, that's fine. And what you said about the roundabout, about the northeast, because I thought originally there was going to be traffic lights there, but it sounds like, yeah, as you said, it's a roundabout that may be better.
No, we modelled a signal controlled junction and a roundabout, and the roundabout option performed better. So
yeah, and I prefer
so we selected the roundabout option for that reason.
Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to go back to Sam Davis, and then I've got no more people who wish to speak, so we'll move on to the environmental impact assessment, but after Sam.
That's very kind of you, Tony. Thank you very much. So the one remaining question I have takes us back to the Nine Wells Nature Reserve. You talked about cycle and pedestrian access to it. I can understand that people would like to be able to access that area. Has there been any environmental impact study looking at specifically the likely effects on that very small and fragile space of making it easier for more people to access it?
So I'll answer, Mike. I don't believe we're making it easier to access it. We are retaining the level of access that's currently available. So on the figure that you can see at the moment, people generally walk either up the Genome Path and then walk alongside Hobson's Brook towards the reserve, or they come from Cambridge and walk along, walk alongside on the Genome Path down to Hobson's Brook and up to the reserve, or there's a permissive path on the northeast boundary hedge line, which runs up to Addenbrooks Road embankment there on the top of the figure. We are essentially retaining that level of access. What we are not proposing is to try and the access along Hobson's Brook Bridge, along the Hobson's Brook towards the Nine Wells. There's not any formal sort of designated access. There is a farm track there, as you can see on the map. That would not be easy to facilitate access. We did look at it quite closely with actually the Hobson's Conduit Trust. What we've agreed is that there will be, to enable people who are coming up from the south, they would be able to cross over the public transport route at the bottom of the corner of that triangular field, where there's a sort of a, can't really tell what the color is, sort of a very faint beige stroke white line going up towards the local nature reserve. So they would be able to walk up a sort of informal path, just as there's a informal route into the nature reserve along the Hobson's Brook. Spoken with the city ecologist who manages the site, and he is content with that arrangement. It would take it into potentially accessing the site from a slightly different point, but he doesn't see any reason why a small cut through hedgerows, existing vegetation that's there in that corner, couldn't be relatively easily done. That vegetation, in his view, is not particularly sensitive or valuable. and people would then be able to join the path network in there. As we are simply maintaining current access provision, then we haven't done any further sort of detailed impact assessment of the impact on the reserve. The scheme itself has no physical impact on the reserve. We're keeping away from it, as you can see.
Thank you. Can I just then ask you to clarify what the nature of the surface will be on the link that's coming in at sort of 11 o'clock, the link that's coming from the Addenbrooks Road roundabout, because at the moment that's just a rough footpath, and presumably the implications of the colouring of that suggest that that's going to be something more formal now?
I understand that it's proposed to be some form of compacted sort of hardcore materials suitable for a farm access track and farm vehicles. So it's replacing well, not quite replacing like for like. It might be a slightly firmer base to the track than exists along the Hobson's Conduit bank, that track along there at the moment, which is just simply in the soil. Yeah.
Okay, I think it's kind of disingenuous to say that what's going on here is not going to bring more people into Nine Wells. I respect that you say you've spoken to the city ecology officer. I'm surprised he's quite as relaxed about this as you suggest, but the very act of making these accesses more visible and giving them firmer surfaces underfoot will flag up the existence of Nine Wells and encourage more people to go there. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying that if that's going to happen, you would think that someone might be thinking ahead to what the impacts might be. It's a tiny space. I often walk my dog there. I remember last summer meeting someone there who had clearly come because he'd heard about it and then said to me, "Is this it? Where's the rest of it?" It's tiny, and flagging it up to people seems to me like it could be really quite damaging to it, but I accept what you're saying.
Okay, I'm going to bring David Plank in for the last word on this, and then we'll move on.
Thank you very much. Two quick points. The first is that the access that is being referred to, the Nine Wells Local Nature Reserve, is not a farm access or a field access. It's an informal path, and to spread compacted material along that area is completely unacceptable. It seems to me that plan needs to be deeply reconsidered. The association argued for one access only. It is perfectly possible to service the local nature reserve with one access, and what is being proposed here is unsympathetic, at the least, to the local nature reserve. The other point I wanted to make, I've written in the chat, which is the reduction to 1,250 spaces at the travel hub is counterintuitive. When staff numbers on the campus are more than 20,000 already, compared with 17,250 in 2018, and planned for 26,000 by 2031, and up to 30,000 beyond that year, plus growing numbers of patients and visitors. The plan for only 1,250 spaces should be increased significantly to avoid undermining the value of this project. So that needs urgent revisiting in the association's view.
Okay, thanks very much for that, David.
Can I just clarify something for David? David, it may be the scale of the figure, but the farm access track as shown there is not replacing the permissive footpath which comes in from the sort of Addenbrooks Road embankment. The farm access track is on the south side of that big hedge. So we're avoiding disturbing the existing hedge. We're putting the farm access track along the edge of the field. So the existing permissive footpath, and that's why in Michael's comment, or as it says here, access along there is either be along the existing permissive path, which is on county council land up towards the nature reserve, or possibly along the farm access, depending whether the landowner permits that. Although I believe that they have no particular objection because people already access along their farm track, which is off Genome Path at the alongside the Hobson's Brook. So it may look like we're replacing a permissive path with the track, but we're not actually. The permissive path would be on the opposite side of the fence.
And I think the point about the reduction to 1,250 car parking space Travel Hub Park and Ride site has been well made, and we've explored that in some detail. So I'm now going to move on to James Montgomery, who's going to talk about the environmental impact assessment. It'll only be a small number of slides, and then we'll break for another discussion and questions, comments, criticisms, and so on.
All right, thank you very much, everyone. Although there may be a few slides, there's quite a lot of text on these. So I'll run through them reasonably quickly and can take questions and discussion afterwards. If you want to go to the next slide, Mike. So as you would imagine, there are going to be a number of temporary effects during construction. Now, when we use the term significant in an EIA context, it needs to be understood what we mean by significant. There are standard methods for assessing significance. They are a matrix assessment, if you like. We have to understand what the nature of an impact might be. So we assess the scale of that impact. It is assessed against, for various different topics, different criteria to define the magnitude of that impact. We also consider the sensitivity or value of the receptor who may be impacted by a particular activity. Those values of those receptors are defined again for the various different topics against standard criteria. As one might expect, value is accorded to, generally the highest value is for receptors that have some level of international importance, rolling down to the local importance having a lower value. So when we then assess a combination of the magnitude of impact against the value of the receptor, we then determine again using established criteria, the scale of the effect being the consequence of the impact. And if the effect is moderate or higher, then it is deemed to be significant. So if something is a low or minor effect, negligible or minor effect, it is not deemed significant. Now, people may sometimes find that they don't agree with it because there is a local perception of significance, but we have to assess these in accordance with standard established criteria. So there are likely to be a number of temporary significant effects. Probably one of the main ones that we have identified to date in terms of ecology is great crested newts. There will be community impacts and visual impacts during construction. There are a few permanent significant effects that have been identified. Now these are, even after we've implemented the mitigation that we have included in the scheme, there would still be some permanent significant effects. We've listed here buried archaeology. Buried archaeology tends to always be considered significant because we don't know what's there. And if you do dig it up, well, it's a significant impact by definition because you've had a major impact on it. If it is buried archaeology that is of low value, then it's not significant, obviously. So that depend just how much of a significant impact would have on buried archaeology will be difficult to tell until we've actually completed the scheme. However, we have done a fair amount of work, advanced works and trial trenching and so on to define where the archaeology is, and we do expect to find further archaeology along the route in places. There would be some landscape and visual impacts, some impacts on landscape character, and some visual impacts for some residents who are close to the route. And those staff at the Cambridge Biomedical Campus and users of some of the public rights of way would have visual impacts from the scheme itself. But by year 15 of operations, then planting around the scheme will have matured. And we have identified 3 areas where significant effects will still be remaining in place. We've listed these here. The restricted byway, which is crossed by the scheme at Sawston, and residents of North Farm, which are private residents that are adjacent to the scheme. The scheme goes through their property, so as one would imagine, there's limited what we can do to their property. Residents on Sawston Road, Linton Way, Stanley Webb Close, and users of the existing cycleway on Sawston Road, if they're looking east towards the A11, would see some impact. And then users of the footpath from Babraham Village to the A11, looking south and southeast, would have some visual impact of the travel hub and the bridge over the Granta there. Next slide. These tables, I'm not going to go through them in detail. They are setting out the main mitigation measures. Now, we're not quite finished the environmental statement. It's still going through final compilation and review. So some of these may change, and we'll need to make that point on the slides that were released to the LLF members tomorrow. Air quality on the whole, during construction, the principal air quality risks are identified as dust. There are standard protection measures for construction for dust control. So construction good practice would mitigate most of those potential issues. And during operation, as the buses will be relatively infrequent in open countryside, and in due course would be electric, there would be minimal to no air quality impacts from the scheme itself. In fact, it would be leading to some marginal benefits to the air quality management area in Cambridge City itself, because the buses that use the scheme from day one will have to be electric powered to operate in the city. That's a condition that we've agreed with the Environmental Health Officer for the city. There's a whole range of biodiversity mitigation measures. There's a construction and environmental management plan that's been produced in draft. There's a landscape and ecological management plan also in draft. These will be submitted as part of the TWAO application to demonstrate the commitment to management measures both during construction and operation, and will be finalized if the scheme is given the approval by the Secretary of State, taking into account any other conditions that come out of the planning process. There will be a requirement for further pre-construction surveys, and as I say, there's quite a lot of detail in here. There are some great crested newts identified in a ditch that runs from Francis Crick Avenue roundabout, Dame Mary Archer, Francis Crick Avenue roundabout down to the Nine Wells, what I call the Nine Wells field, which would be removed by the scheme. So we have to create new habitat for that. We've talked about watervole as habitat creation already. The landscaping would improve connectivity along patches of woodland and grassland along the scheme. And there is a couple of badger sets that are impacted, which we would have to close and create new ones. Next slide, please, Mike. For climate and carbon, I've already mentioned the electric powered buses during operation. There is a standard for assessing carbon past 2080, which is looks at both embedded and operational carbon, and that will be followed. It has already been used, that specification and the process for that, to try and improve carbon from the scheme in terms of carbon embedded in the design. And we expect that to be continued. It's a standard used by many public bodies these days through into detailed design. And there are solar panels proposed for the travel hub to provide power for operational requirements of the hub itself. The historic environment, we've already done archaeological investigation. There will be further archaeological investigation with recording of assets that are uncovered. We've reduced the granted crossing at Stapleford to minimize its impact on the landscape and the setting there. And we've looking to try and there are the importance of that is that there is a listed building with a long view of the Granter Valley. The building, I forget, escapes the name of it escapes me at the moment, but it's up on towards Magog Down. And so one of the reasons for trying to minimize the height of the bridge was to reduce the impact on that long distance view from up there. We've also done similar to openness of views along the avenue at Babraham Hall. There's a long avenue. We've avoided putting trees that would actually obscure the view that are currently visible along that avenue in that visibility in that sort of corridor that's available at the moment. There's a lot of planting, as you imagine, along the scheme. This is a mix of tree-lined hedgerows along much of the routes. There are woodland belts and places where it's appropriate to do that. And there's grassland integrated into the scheme. We are trying to recreate the avenue feel that currently exists along Francis Crick Avenue within the constraints imposed by the design. But as Mike said earlier, we have widened the area of landscaping from what was originally proposed to enable us to ensure the landscaping is something similar. We are further looking at some of the views from Coppice Avenue, which look where houses back look up towards the scheme, and the scheme is potentially at high visibility there. So there's tree planting and landform that we're looking at to try and minimize the impact in due course over time. And as we've talked already, tree planting and hedgerows around the travel hub to minimize impacts there. If the travel hub, or when the travel hub is expanded in scale, then the screening planting around the perimeter would not be impacted by the increase in car parking. Next slide, please, Mike. Noise and vibration. Generally, the scheme delivers no significant effects along the route itself. This is largely due to the relatively low numbers of vehicles compared to a normal highway. However, they will also, the scheme will have a low noise surface on it along the dedicated route. In a few places where there is development close to adjacent housing, acoustic barriers and bunds would be put in. Now, these are not very high bunds. The bunds are aimed to be sort of a metre in height, relatively close to the actual carriageway of the scheme. The closer you can get the noise attenuation measured to the source of noise, the more effective it is. And in places where we'd put a bund, the main noise source is likely to be tyre noise on the road. So if we have a low bund near the road, it has as good, if not better, noise attenuation than a taller screen, a fence further away. There will be construction noise that will be controlled through limiting working hours to standard normal construction hours, and limiting work at weekends or overnight to only that is essential. And there would be temporary acoustic barriers and so on around areas where there might be noise. And any plant would be plant with appropriate noise mitigation of engines and, for example, generators on site and so on. Traffic and transport, main mitigation proposals are potentials for conflict where the scheme crosses existing highway or in the stops. So conflict between motorized users and walkers, cyclists, equestrians. And the design is taking those into account by trying to increase the segregation where we can. The genome path, reference DNA path here, the realignment has been designed to, I'm not sure, that's quite right. Avoid increasing journey length where possible. Actually, we're just realigning it to, and we're widening it along the route where it would join the active travel path of the scheme. The remainder of the genome path, I believe that any improvements and upgrade to that would be part of one of the greenway schemes being promoted by GCP. During construction, there will be approved routes for construction traffic that avoid village centres, and there will be designated routes as well for certain construction compounds along the route. And next slide. I think that might be the last one. No. Water resource and flood risk. We've taken into account climate change. It's embedded in the design process these days for any drainage design and flood risk assessments. We're minimizing any vegetation clearance along the banks to minimize impacts, the river banks, sorry, of the Granta, to minimize any impact on ecology. Temporary bridges would need to be sort of up and over bridges and not simply a culvert in the river itself. No storage or stockpiling, and so on. The entire drainage design is based on a SUDS design, so it's that is embedded in the design principles anyway. And the scheme includes some flood compensation areas where there's a very minor loss of flood storage from the bridge structures crossing the floodplains. We've provided flood compensation storage as part of the scheme to compensate for that. Resources and waste, there is an outline site waste management plan which would be developed further, and there would be improvements, or not improvements, there would be detail in the construction environmental management plan on how pollution control, material storage, waste handling, and any emergency planning was to be dealt with during construction. There is also a draft soil management strategy which sets out how soils are to be managed during construction and how they might be reused on site as well. I think that's the last one.
Okay, well, I've got David Blake who wants to kick off with some questions or comment.
The first one I have is, I was wondering if I can have confirmation on the form of bus or form of transport that's actually been selected. Is it going to be an electric bus on a guided routeway? And secondly, there was comment by a GCP officer some time ago that if the mayor's metro doesn't go ahead, then there will be no need for this route across Greenbelt. I was wondering what had happened with regard to that particular issue. Thank you.
Well, in terms of the vehicle that's been selected, there's no specific vehicle that's been selected as yet, but there is a requirement that the vehicle would be electric powered when it's operating within the city as a minimum. The intention is that all buses will in due course become electric powered for operation on the scheme throughout. I believe that in discussions with various operators and bus manufacturers, technology is not quite there yet in order to provide a electric powered bus that has capacity to run along the entire scheme for an operational cycle during the day. But they are, significant advances are being made, and the anticipation is that such fully electric buses would be available in due course. The expectation is that on opening there would be a hybrid bus, and my understanding, and Mike can correct me if I'm wrong, a hybrid bus would essentially be an electric powered bus with an electric engine with a small diesel generator on the bus that would then provide power to the electric engine when it was not actually operating under its own full from its own battery packs. So the capacity of the generator needs to be much smaller than a full diesel engine if it was a standard normal diesel bus. The generator itself will be smaller capacity, lower emissions, and less noisy than a standard diesel bus.
James, happy to add to that. So, well, just to be clear, GCP's aspiration is that there should be fully electric vehicles operating on this CSET infrastructure from day one of operation. The technology to deliver that without en route opportunity charging infrastructure isn't quite there at the moment, but we are very confident that with the advances in the energy density of battery technology and the light weighting of public transport vehicles, that it will be there by the planned opening year of 2025. So given that situation, for environmental impact assessment purposes only, the environmental impact assessment has been conducted on the basis that the vehicle assessed is the hybrid electric bus as described by James. So the environmental impact assessment assumes that the vehicles would run entirely on electric power between the point that they enter the biomedical campus at Addenbrooks Road and Dame Mary Archway Roundabout through to Cambridge City Centre and back again. When the hybrid vehicle is operating outside urban areas, then it would be permitted to operate in the mode where the small diesel generator is switched on to recharge the battery. But just to be clear, that is a worst case scenario purely for so that we can demonstrate that we're not underestimating an impact because we're assuming the use of technology that isn't available at this particular moment in time, but we are confident will be available in advance of 2025. So it's a conservative approach for the purpose of the EIA. It doesn't in any way reduce the GCP ambition to deliver full electric operation from day one.
Okay, my second question, if I just remember, was one of these GCP officers told Cambridge Past, Present and Future that this particular route through the Greenbelt was only being put forward because of the desire to match in with the mayor of Peterborough and Cambridgeshire and his desire for his metro. Now that's no longer going ahead. Are we going to sort of look at the impact of what you're proposing and go to alternative options, which may include on-road or off-road into the city? Thank you. Jane, do you want to answer that, or would you like me to?
I think that is the comment is sort of news to me, because all of GCP's schemes have been designed to work by themselves. So it's not dependent on CAM at all.
I mean, just to evidence that, the origin of the CSET scheme dates back to consultation. First consultation on the CSET scheme was in 2016. The off-road public transport route, I understand, originates from or was discussed at workshops with the local liaison forum in 2017. All this is before the CAM project even existed. So the consultations in 2018 and onwards have acknowledged the existence of the CAM project, but the scheme has always been, the scheme predates any conception of CAM, and the justification for the scheme exists, without CAM. The concept of CAM compliance has only come about since the combined authority published their local transport plan sub-strategy for CAM in April 2020, and the at that point, that was after the development of shortlisted route options for the scheme, which were consulted on in 2019. So the timeline of events clearly demonstrates that the scheme has been developed independently of CAM and whatever the new mayor decides, that the scheme is a freestanding scheme.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, now I don't have any more people who wish to say anything or make comments, so shall we move on to the variant routes? I should say at this point that this meeting was scheduled for 6 o'clock to 8 o'clock. I'm expecting to go beyond 8 o'clock to cover what we have left to consider on the agenda. So variant routes, and I'm not sure who's going to present this, but
I'll take this, Tony.
Okay, over to you, Michael. So just a small number of slides, and then we'll break for comments again, questions, concerns, etc.
Okay, so just to explain to everybody what the pink route variant is, this originated as a alternative alignment that was proposed in responses to the EIA consultation. So the next slide explains this. So you can see on this plan there are 3 routes taking different alignments from the travel hub, which is the shaded outline, and all joining up at the same point after they have crossed High Street. So the most direct route is the current preferred route, the brown route from the 2019 consultation on route options. The plan also shows one of the other shortlisted routes from the 2019 consultation, which is the pink route. The pink route runs closest to the A505 Granta Park interchange and to the north of the old railway alignment at that point. So the pink variant route, which is the one further north of the pink route, is the route that was proposed in EIA consultation responses by a small number of respondents. You can see it's not dramatically different from the pink route. The key difference is that it runs to the north of a field boundary, which means that it's around 120 meters shorter than the pink route, and it runs wholly within the same land ownership as the brown route, whereas the original pink route ran into that field on the other side of the hedge, which is under different land ownership. Following this being put forward in the EIA consultation, there was a meeting held with a number of the people who'd put this forward, and they asked us to do an assessment of this new pink variant route. So the next slides just provide a brief summary of that assessment. This assessment has been published as an appendix to the joint assembly papers, so that's available to review in full. This is just a very brief summary of it. So one of the points made in favour of the pink route variant by those proposing this was that they felt that this had environmental benefits relative to the brown route, particularly in terms of a reduced landscape and visual impact as a result of instead of going directly across the River Granta with the pink route variant, as indeed would have been the case also for the pink route. The route is crossing the River Granta Valley directly adjacent to the existing A11 bridge, as you can see there. However, there were other less positive aspects of the pink route variant in terms of its impact on biodiversity, particularly the fact that it was running close to the hedgerow. James, I don't know if you can just elaborate on the issues around this route running close to the hedgerow. So that hedgerow does have some habitat value used by breeding birds, commuting route for bats. Anything else to add to that, James?
There'll be probably reptiles associated with it as well. So it's just a very big, well-established hedge, which will have inevitably a number of...
James, is that you?
Yeah, we're not hearing you, James.
No, I can't hear you, James.
Oh, sorry, I had my headset further up. I was just saying that it's a large established hedge, which has a number of uses by various different species. Reptiles are probably there, although we haven't done reptile survey specifically. But we do know that there are badgers using it. Given the size of it and how many what we see bats using similar hedges, we can expect bats to be using it quite extensively. And breeding birds will probably be using it, both farm birds and other birds.
Okay, thanks, James. So there is there are full details of the environmental comparison of the preferred route and the pink route variant are in that appendix to the joint assembly papers. So moving on to costs and benefits, so a cost estimate was prepared for the pink route variant on a comparable basis to the brown route, and that found that the estimated construction costs for both routes were largely similar. From a benefits perspective, you can see that the pink route variant is longer than the preferred brown route. That results in longer journey times for public transport users travelling from the travel hub, and therefore lower time savings for users relative to a scheme following the brown route. So that lower time saving does build up to a 9% reduction in benefits for the pink route variant compared to the preferred brown route. So similar costs, lower benefits means that the benefit cost ratio of the pink route variant compared to the brown route is marginally lower, but similar to the difference between the brown route and the original pink route reported in the outline business case, which contributed to the brown route being recommended as the preferred option. So the conclusion of this assessment was that while the outcome of the assessment was, the alternative routes are quite closely matched overall, there was nothing in the assessment that justified overturning the decision to adopt the brown route as the preferred route that was made by the GCP Executive Board in June last year.
So I'm going to stop on this for questions, comments, etc. before we move to the Stapleford, Great Shelford alternative route. So Matthew Puncheon, please.
Thanks, Tony. Michael, could you remind me what the conclusion of the Mcdonald report was again? What it actually said?
I don't have it in front of me, Matthew, but
I do.
But
I'll read
I can.
It. That's fine, Michael. I'll read it to you. Whilst the results of this assessment support the brown route as the preferred route alignment, the technical assessment results for the pink route variant are sufficiently close that GCP could also take into account public stakeholder opinion in reaching a decision on whether to consider the pink route variant for adoption as the preferred route instead of the current brown route alignment. Now that is a statement that we made at our meeting a week ago, and we clearly agreed a set of actions that came out of that meeting, which from Jane's email this morning and your statement today has clearly ridden cart and horses through the discussions that we had, which is an interesting concept in consultation, as you can probably imagine. Now, let me come back to it. The Mcdonald conclusion is that you can take the views of the public involved, which is what a consultation is about. I mean, you guys may have forgotten that, but it is about a consultation with members of the public, and your own report states that that is the case. Andrew Munro was very clear at our last meeting when I asked him, would you take into account public views of the new pink variant route, because he's fundamentally different in that he's in different landholdings. The vote difference between the pink route and the brown routes was 4. So why can you then reconfirm what Andrew Munro confirmed a week ago, that you will take into account the public opinion of the new pink variant route?
Well,
actually, I sent referring to my email that I sent to you today. What we said is that we've had a full public consultation in 2019 and again in 2020, and we're unable to consider the views of Birmingham residents alone.
Jane, that's not what we said at the meeting the other day. That's what you've now made up. You said it.
No, we haven't just made that up. We've
got the recording.
Yes.
Jane, we've got the recording. We can go back.
Yeah.
Agreed. But what I'm saying is we're unable to consider just the views of Birmingham alone. We have to take into account everybody's views. And on the basis of that, the technical work that we have done still shows that the brown route is the preferred route.
No, the conclusion that you come. Sorry.
Let me just interrupt at this stage. I think we just ought to focus on the issues about what are the key issues about the different routes, and what it says in the conclusion is what you've read out, and that is in the agenda papers for the joint assembly meeting on Thursday. So we can argue about what was or what wasn't said or promised at a previous meeting, which I happened to attend and was present as well. But I think the key issue here is in terms of what it says about the conclusion that is drawn in that Mcdonald report, and how that might be or might not be taken forward.
I think, Tony, that's a statement for Jane.
Tony. Is that, sorry, can you repeat that, Tony?
Yeah. the agenda paper is going to the joint assembly.
Yes.
Clearly include the full report that was produced by Mcdonald, which Matthew's just read out the conclusion.
Yes.
So the question is, how is that conclusion going to be taken forward in the meeting?
It's for the joint assembly members to decide, because we've given them everything. And what I've also said to Matthew is he can send in questions to the panel, to the joint assembly members, and also into the Z board.
Well, thanks for that. I mean, so effectively what you're saying is that you will not take into account your own report when you make a recommendation to the boards, which is an interesting concept. Just to add to that, a very interesting conclusion from a gentleman earlier, I think his name was Michael Plank, I think his name was, David Plank, about the reduction in car parking spaces, which was a big surprise to us, even though we had a meeting only a week ago. The BCR reduction as a result of that means that the differential between the two becomes even smaller. So why are you still using the old data, exactly as David said, rather than reporting on using new data from your new model, which you have not published?
We're not using the new data because it's still going through the check-in process, as I've said, within GCP.
So you're providing reports.
We're only able to refer to that publicly once we're happy with that data.
Well, why have you publicly said you're going to 1,250 parking spaces? Because obviously that's based on data that you've already analysed. And by the way, you said that the spaces were going to be 2,000 spaces, and when in discussion with the landowner, you said there was probably going to be a further 1,000. But let's base it off 2,000. You've halved the number of spaces on that site, which means that the benefit that you claim is there is halved. And therefore,
Matthew, can I respond to that? In the EIA consultation, we said up to 2,000 spaces. The reduction in spaces is not reducing that. The reduction in planned spaces in the to be provided from the opening year is not reducing the demand or the benefits. It's simply not providing capacity that there isn't demand for.
But your analysis must have been based on 2,000 parking spaces originally, and that will have amassed the benefits of the 25 seconds longer that the journey time takes, and that will have amassed your thing. If there are only going to be 1,000 parking spaces, you must have half the journeys.
There's never been enough demand to justify 2,000 spaces in the absence of other complementary measures such as the city access programme. So we haven't. It wouldn't make any sense to reduce the size of the travel hub in a way that reduced the demand for the scheme. That would make no sense at all, and we wouldn't. We simply wouldn't do that. It would make no sense to choke off demand in that way.
Michael, that makes no sense. Because
could I just comment at this stage, because some comment has been made earlier in the meeting about the reduction in the number of car parking spaces, certainly in the original phase. So the question that I think is, what figures were used to come out to actually calculate a BCR value in the first place? And how is that impacted by any changes in the initial numbers in the travel hub car parking spaces?
Well, reducing capacity that is excess capacity over and above demand has no effect on the benefit cost ratio, other than to actually reduce, if we build the travel hub to a smaller size, that actually generates some cost saving. So it actually, not building capacity that isn't strictly necessary actually improves the benefit cost ratio of the scheme.
Yeah, Michael, I see that. So what you're saying is you originally did, am I right in saying that you originally designed it with only 1,000 vehicles parking and therefore 1,000 people's of journey time? And therefore the reduction is only matching that? Is that what you've done?
We designed something that could be larger because there were other parallel projects that under certain circumstances could have increased demand for the travel hub beyond the demand that would purely be generated by the CSET scheme. So I mentioned the city access program. At the point that we have to fix a design to take forward to a Transport and Works Act order application, the city access program hasn't come forward with any measures that are that we can take account of in our making our case for the travel hub to be of a certain size. The other point that I should mention is that which I should have mentioned earlier, is in their response to the EIA consultation, the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority specifically made representations that the 2,000 spaces proposed at the travel hub was too high, and that should be revisited downwards. So so that is a factor that has also influenced the reduction in the plan. But I mean, let's be clear, this is the proposed capacity in the opening year. There is provision within the footprint of the travel hub for additional capacity to be provided if demand warrants that at some later date.
Thank you. Tony, you've got one last question, if okay.
Go on then.
Thank you. All I was going to say is from what James said, obviously you are progressing ahead, notwithstanding what we agreed at the last meeting. What dates are the various meetings that you are taking this to? Is the Z meeting or something you said, or the
Joint Assembly meeting is on the 10th of June. Then the ZEC board meeting is the 1st of July. And the public inquiry itself is somewhere next year.
Yeah, I mean, it's, you're not taking this to the public inquiry. I can see that now on the basis of where this is. But thank you for that. Tony, thank you for your indulgence.
I've got Miranda Fife now.
Hi, I've unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, it was really quick. I put a comment in the chat and I'm not sure if it was answered. I just wanted to know what exactly the difference in timing was between the pink variant route and the brown route. Did someone say 25 seconds?
25 seconds is what's been used in the assessment, Miranda.
Okay, that's fine. Just wanted to clarify that, 25 seconds. Thank you.
I saw a comment from Howard. Did Howard want to come in then?
Yes, I put a couple of questions forward. I think I'm particularly worried about the conversation about the VCR, the benefit cost ratio. We have been asking for 3 months now to see the revised economic model, and for reasons I don't understand, that's not been disclosed. So we are apparently being asked to make decisions in a vacuum. Is this whole question about valuing the landscape under the TAG, sorry, the government would expect a valuation of landscapes. There's been a qualitative analysis which indicates adverse impact on the landscape. Frankly, the adverse impact on landscape isn't just from people's houses, It's the iconic views from the Magogs and down from the Magogs and up across the whole of Magog down. And I'm again coming back to the BCR situation. If you actually factored in everything we've been talking about tonight, I really do speculate how the GCP can process with such an uneconomic scheme.
Michael or Jane?
Well, I think what I can say, Howard, is that the work that has been done since the outline business case has been done with the objective of improving the business case for this scheme. So, let me give you an example of something that wasn't factored into the outline business case assessment, where the focus was on selecting between shortlisted route options. All the route options, and indeed the preferred route, include an active travel path alongside the entire length of the scheme. The outline business case assessment included the costs of the active travel path, but did not include any benefits from the active travel path. In the updated work, there are additional benefits captured from using the Department for Transport active mode assessment tool methodology to actually capture economic benefits of the provision of the active travel infrastructure. So the costs of that are quite significant, but now, which were already included, we will now, in the next iteration of the economic case, actually have benefits that are attributable to directly to providing the active travel infrastructure as part of the scheme, in addition to the public transport route. So that's an area where the business case for the scheme has been refined and enhanced through additional work.
Okay, it's interesting. You're now designing an extra active travel route to go to the same direction. So we've got 1, 2, 3, we've got 4 or 5 routes. How can you justify them all being economic? You've got the Abraham route, you've got the existing route into Sawston. We've got the Sawston Greenway project, and we've got CSET. All those paths are going from the same place, the Cambridge Biomedical Centre, all ending up at the same place. I keep saying this, I'll be really intrigued to see your business model. And actually, we've just put in a Freedom of Information request to see your model. So hopefully all will become clear in due course.
Well, Howard, we've committed to publish that information as and when GCP have approved that work.
How long have you had it? You've had it since November, haven't you?
No, it's much more recent than that in terms of it being completed.
So when do you actually expect it to be published? Can you tell the meeting?
I wouldn't want to commit. I wouldn't want to commit to any specific dates, Tony. Well, as we said, once it's available, it's going through our own internal checks. So we wouldn't want to publish something that we're not comfortable with. So once that is available, we'll send it out ASAP.
Okay. Well, Howard's request for it to be published is on the record of this meeting. So we've heard that. So I'm going to move on to Matt Danish, please.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I just want to come back to a point from earlier in the presentation. Is this the time to do it?
Well, go on and we'll see.
Okay, so I went to look up the appendices to the, to show the plans in more detail in the papers for the Joint Assembly. And I noticed something very new and alarming that I hadn't seen before. So I'm at the travel hub, the Baberham travel hub diagram, and I'm looking at the bridge ramps. And we've been talking about these bridge ramps for a very long time because obviously the existing bridge over the A11 has steps, and that's not suitable for active travel. And what I see here is, okay, path to connect upgraded bridge to allow access for cyclists and mobility impaired users, which is great. And then in the next bubble, it says new ramps to be provided, step-free access to the existing A11 overbridges, cyclists to dismount when crossing. These are in conflict. And what is going on here? Since when do we take something that was supposed to be access for all, and we're getting rid of steps and replacing them with ramps, and then you say, oh no, actually, we're just getting rid of that benefit entirely, and we're telling people to dismount. I mean, how am I going to tell disabled cyclists to dismount? That's absolutely terrible, and you're invoking an Equality Act violation here, in fact. So I want to know who exactly had this, I don't know, genius idea to stick in cyclists to dismount when crossing what is supposed to be an active travel bridge. And we may have to take this to another meeting. So can we have another meeting about this? Because I'm trying to get this bridge fixed so that it's actually usable by people rather than being unusable as it currently is.
Okay, well, Matt, the issue there is the width of the bridge and the height of the parapets in terms of its suitability for cycling. So fixing those issues would require significant additional works to the bridge over and above the provision of the ramps. But happy to, I think that we should take this
So the NMU meeting.
this offline, and yeah, if we could discuss it at the next NMU working group, that would be seems to be the most appropriate forum for that.
Okay, Matthew.
All right. Yeah, go on, Jane. Sorry.
No, I was just saying to Matthew Danish, if that was all right, we can pick it up at the next NMU meeting.
Okay, Matt.
Okay.
Okay, Robert Atwood.
Yeah, just one quick question with the brown route compared to the pink. Why can't you consider the pink route when clearly the parish of Baberham want that more than anything else? The brown route just cuts through the middle of all the fields across the ancient water meadow, and it just seems that it would be more environmentally friendly to everyone. I mean, the whole thing's quite ugly anyway. I mean, you're ruining half the countryside. So why not let us have the pink route? I can't quite understand why you don't even think about it.
We have thought about it. That's why we've done all the assessments that we've done.
Yes, but you haven't consulted the people in the parish who, I'm afraid, know more about Baberham than anybody else.
Yes, that's why we had the previous consultation. And what we're saying is we're unable to consider just the views of Baberham residents alone.
Did you say you're thinking about what people at Baberham say or not?
No. I said we're unable to consider just the views of Baberham residents alone. We'll need to take everyone's views into account, and that was what was done.
Well, but Baberham is our village and our parish, and it is quite a nice place. And to put what you're putting there, I think we should have a little bit of a say, don't you?
Well, you've posed the question and you've heard the answers given. So
okay,
we're going to go round in over ground we've already covered before. I'm going to bring in Jim Rickard and then Matt Danish again. Jim?
Just confirm you can hear me.
Yes, Jim.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm just concerned that those of us who want to challenge the route are getting talked out of time by some detailed points are coming up. I mean, rightly or wrongly, there was this understanding that the route had to be CAN compatible, and that condition, that criterion, eliminated any use of the A1307 itself. Given that, from what people have said, you sound as though you're going to be struggling with the business case anyway, what about just starting simple? Build the park and ride and run buses from there with a combination of bus lanes and a dedicated busway on and alongside the A1307 until you get past Branham's Road, where you would branch off on a new bit of busway to skirt the southeastern edge of the biomedical campus and come back to the roundabout with Francis Crick Avenue. It just seems so much simpler, so much less irreversible infrastructure, so much less intrusion onto the green belt, and I suspect so much less cost. Why not start simple with some reversible, if necessary, low-cost measures like that?
Michael or Jane?
Yeah, thank you, Jim, for your comment. But I think Mike had mentioned previously that the scheme started way before CAM. The compliance with CAM was just by the way. And again, the consultation and various consultations that have taken place in the past has led to where we are right now. So again, thank you for your points, but having to set everything aside will mean putting aside the views that that we've taken into account over the years.
Yeah, so the two alternatives you're suggesting were the alternative strategies, strategy 2 and strategy 3, that were consulted on in 2018. The current scheme is based on strategy 1, which was the most strongly supported strategy in the 2018 public consultation. So these alternatives have been included in the scheme development process and consulted on at an earlier stage, and were not as strongly supported as the strategy on which the current scheme is based. So so these matters have been considered and consulted upon at an earlier stage in the scheme development.
Yeah, I would only comment that the A1307 option disappeared from the later consultation. I mean, you're clearly right that it was in the earlier consultation, but then it disappeared. And it just seemed strange that so many of us thought this CAN compatibility was a constraint on the scheme. I mean, we can't all be wrong, if you like. We must have got it from somewhere, and I fully accept what you say about the timing, but we thought that that had been a criterion. And as Howard has just put on the chat, I mean, you split that earlier consultation by having different choices along the A1307. When we very recently consulted Great Shelford residents on would they like the proposed route, the old railway route, or the A1307 route, it was the 1307 that came out on top, with the proposed route at the bottom.
Okay, well, I don't think that information has been shared with the project team, and obviously that it's clear that the views on this scheme do depend on on local area that those views are from, and well, as we've heard earlier, there is a particular point of view from the Babraham residents, which is understandable, and obviously there may be differing views on particular aspects of the scheme depending on the area that people are located in along the route. But as Jane has said, we do, and this is what we've sought to do through all the previous consultations, is consider all the views from those throughout the area where the consultation has taken place.
Okay, I'm grateful to the chairman for letting me have the time. I've had my time. I'd just comment that looking at the comments on the chat, I'm not alone.
Yep. Okay, thanks for that, Jim. And I think your comments about Howard and that lead naturally onto the Shelford, the Stapleford Railway realignment.
Okay, so I thought it'd be important that we just made it clear to everybody on the call what we are referring to when we talk about the Shelford Railway alignment. So Shelford Railway alignment is the blue dashed line on this image. So so where the preferred route runs to the northeast of Stapleford and Shelford, just touching the edges of the villages. The Shelford Railway alignment follows the former alignment of the Cambridge Haverhill Railway to the point that it reaches the existing main line to London Liverpool Street. It would then run in the cutting alongside the railway under the A1301 as far as Shelford Station. There is no former railway alignment north of Shelford Station. So, but as you can see, the dashed line runs through an existing built-up area north of Great Shelford Station, so through the Mill Court Business Park and through the Chaston Road residential area, and then crosses Granham's Road adjacent to the railway and joins up with the preferred route north of Granham's Road. So that's the alternative alignment that we are, that is the subject of this section of the meeting. So the history of this is that very briefly, this alignment was considered at the strategic outline business case stage of the project and was rejected at that stage. The basis for the justification for it rejecting this alternative has been subsequently questioned by stakeholders, and that resulted in GCP commissioning Mcdonald to undertake a further study of the Shelford Railway alignment, which was published in May 2020, prior to the board decision to adopt the preferred route. Subsequently, Great Shelford and Stapleford parish councils have commissioned a report from iTransport consultants to independently review the Mcdonald work on the Shelford Railway alignment. In response to that, GCP have commissioned a report from Atkins, and that the brief for Atkins was to conduct an independent review of all the previous work on the Shelford railway alignment. So the work done by WSP at strategic outline business case stage, the work done by Mcdonald and published in May 2020, and the work done by iTransport, which was published in March 2021. So, so the report from Atkins has been published in full as an appendix to the Joint Assembly papers. So in summary, Atkins considered that the information presented in the 2020 Mcdonald report was a fair assessment at a feasibility stage. The 4 issues that Atkins identified in the previous documents in terms of reasons for not considering this to be a viable alternative related to segregation, land acquisition, deliverability and cost. On segregation, Atkins considered that while segregation is one of the key scheme objectives, they did take the view that there was scope for design compromise, scope for and a requirement for design compromise to overcome constraints. So the issue of segregation was not considered to be a showstopper for the for the Shelford railway alignment at this stage. However, that left land acquisition, deliverability and costs. So Atkins concluded that land acquisition would be one of the major risks associated with this alternative compared to the preferred route. And in particular, the proposals put forward by iTransport would include the need to redevelop Shelford Station. The alignment proposed by iTransport runs straight through the existing Shelford Station building. It also runs straight through the Anglian Water pumping station north of Granham's Road. Both Network Rail and Anglian Water are statutory undertakers. It is not possible to compulsorily acquire land from a statutory undertaker. So that's why there are significant additional risks as a result of the proposals that involve taking operational railway land at Shelford Station and requiring the relocation of the pumping station. So both Mcdonald and iTransport, Atkins found that Mcdonald and iTransport were in agreement that the scheme cost for the Shelford railway alignment would be higher than the preferred route. The main reasons for that being the complex rail interface requirement and land acquisition costs. So in summary, the conclusion from the Atkins independent review was that while the scheme may be feasible from a purely engineering perspective, Atkins concluded that the risks associated with land acquisition, construction complexity and construction program remain high and adversely affect the scheme delivery. So that was the findings of an independent review commissioned by GCP that considered all of the previous work conducted on the Shelford railway alignment, including the iTransport report commissioned by the parish councils.
Okay, well, I've got Jim Rickard indicating he wants to speak. Jim?
No,
Oh, you just
I'm
left
sorry,
your hand up.
that's an error. That was my hand up from when I
Okay.
spoke before. Sorry about that.
Okay. Jenny Flynn sent a comment round. Does Jenny want to say something?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, the comment that I made was that the iTransport report was funded by 2 parish councils and local crowdfunding. And so clearly all that we could afford to do was an initial feasibility study using information that was available in the secondary domain. Clearly, if we had had access to far more money, far more data, as the GCP has had years and years and years to get to its current point, further research and development would have served to offset some of these risks. And that would be the case for any major infrastructure project. So the point I'm making is that this particular slide is grossly unfair.
Okay. Do we have any other people who want to make any? Yeah, Howard?
Yes, just following on from what Jenny has said, the fact is that we've been asking the GCP for 5 or 6 years to bottom out the 3 issues that Atkins identified. You know, it's frustrating that Atkins have come to the same conclusion that we came to, you know, and we've had to commission a completely independent report from specialist consultants that have completely refuted. I mean, even Peter Blake on ITV Anglia News on Thursday evening was, during the interview, when he was interviewed on television, he said, of course, the reason we can't do the Shelford rail alignment is because there's so much residential property to be demolished. And whilst Peter Blake continues to tell these sort of facts, which are not facts, I won't call them lies because I don't want to slander anybody, but unless GCP start telling the truth, we really, really worry about the whole situation. That route will not require wholesale demolition. The Mcdonald Report, which was produced in 2020, don't let Michael confuse you. You know, this report wasn't looked at in 2016 when the whole process started. They did a retrospective report in 2020, literally days before last year's joint assembly, where they were asking permission to go ahead. You know, the iTransport report showed that the GCP had not carried out proper consultation. They'd excluded the Stapleford Shelford area from their original area of search. They had not followed through on the questions that have been raised at consultation. Some areas have not been recorded correctly for future reference in terms of public consultation. The whole thing is as someone has said already on the chat tonight, it's smoke and mirrors. And the sooner our politicians call it out, the fairer it will be for everybody.
Does anyone want to comment on that?
Well, Tony, I don't think it's appropriate for Mcdonald to comment on an independent review.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, well,
be it the iTransport report or the Atkins report, there are a few issues which I would say that are still issues, looking at it from any angle. One of them is the cost. The cost is still higher than the preferred route. And then the iTransport report also confirms the requirement for demolition. Be it residential, be it commercial, there's still some demolition involved. And that also leads to greater impact on the railway infrastructure and operations. And then again, there are unresolved design constraints along that route. If you take it from the iTransport point of view, we're looking at the pumping station, we're looking at station building, we're looking at bridge structures. All of those have to be taken into account. The iTransport report also does not resolve the conflicts with the railway line, additional level crossings and so on. So we're not just looking at it from one aspect, we're looking at it from different points of view. I mean, different aspects.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Do I have any other speakers or comments? Yeah. Does Howard want to say something else? Howard?
Sorry, just going back and starting a new thought here. I would love it if the GCP could think strategically about Cambridge's problems, and we stop doing things in a silo. We've got East-West Rail, we've got CSET, we've got C2C. None of these schemes are joined up. Personally, I'm all in favour of infrastructure that is joined up. Actually, I'm not intrinsically opposed to busways, but I do believe that a light rail system would give Cambridge the scalability and the efficiency that it needs. And while we fiddle at the edges with 20th century solutions like buses, which will be diesel buses in the countryside, running to 1,200 or 2,000 space car parks, dragging in cars from miles away, undermining the local bus service. I'm really pleased that the mayor is now talking holistically about a proper bus and rail transport system. I'm all in favour of it. What I'm against is the smoke and mirrors and this silo approach.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Did I see Matt Danish's hand up? Matt?
Sorry, thanks. Yeah, I guess I just want to make one final comment, question actually. While I'm here, what is the parapet height on that bridge?
Matt, I'm sorry, I don't have that information in my head. There is a drawing with that measurement on it somewhere. We'll answer your question in writing on that.
Okay, and are you committed to inclusivity and local transport note 1/20?
The history of this particular part of the scheme is that it's been brought into the phase 2 project from CSET phase 1. The proposals that are as they stand are the proposals from the phase 1 scheme, which predate LTN 120. So well, we said we agreed to discuss this further at the NMU working group.
Well, what I would like, well, first of all, you should be committed to inclusivity and LTN 1/20. Number 2, when you do come to the meeting, I want you to come with proposals to fix this problem. Essentially, we shouldn't be at this point where we're debating cyclists dismount signs. This is supposed to be a bridge that's usable by all people, including disabled cyclists and people who can't dismount, who have heavy bikes or whatever reason. It shouldn't even be a question. It's an active travel bridge. So I hope that, 24th is, I believe, the next GCP meeting. It was pushed back. The next NMU meeting. Do come with some explanations and also some proposals for fixing this, because I think this is quite unreasonable. There are plenty of places in Cambridge where parapet heights are not an issue. For example, on the A603 bridge over the M11, I might add, where people have been cycling, and it's part of the Greenways program, with lower than really desired parapet heights for many years or decades even. So again, I don't think this is a reasonable decision, and I want to see it changed by the next NMU meeting. Thank you.
Okay, well, if there's a precedent for cycling over bridges with substandard parapet heights, then that's something that we would take into account.
Okay, well, I hope you can resolve that at the next meeting that you have. Can I now ask Jane just to talk through timescales for what the future holds?
So we have the GCP Joint Assembly on the 10th of June, as I mentioned, on the exec board. We expect to submit the Transport and Works Act application in October. Thereafter, we'll have the public inquiry starting, I can give you the date. We're looking at the public inquiry starting sometime in the summer, about June next, 2022. June, sorry, 2022, yes. And thereafter, we then go into the start of works. We're looking at autumn 2023 and completion late, about December 2025. In between all of this, there will be touch points when we go back to the exec board for approvals. That's it.
So that's an update on the next steps following on from the last meeting. So all the relevant dates, or the two key next dates are the GCP Joint Assembly meeting on the 10th of June and the Executive Board meeting on the 1st of July. Well, I'd like to thank everybody for taking part in this meeting. I know some people have left already, but I do appreciate that these issues are of great concern to many local people. And so thank you for all your comments and contributions to the meeting this evening. And I formally declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much.